you able to see the stars in the night sky where you live when you get up at 2:00 in the morning and shout, good morning?
Honestly, I can't remember because I feel like we've hardly seen any sunlight for the last 4 months because the sky's been covered by clouds.
Oh.
But yeah, no, not very easily here.
Yeah, here in Paris, you can see quite a lot of satellites twinkling majestically overhead. But I only realized quite how bad the light pollution was here in Paris a couple of weeks ago when my husband told me really excitedly one morning that he got up in the night to, I don't know, to have a glass of water or something. And he had stopped in his tracks because in the darkness of the kitchen, he could actually see stars in the sky over Paris.
Wow.
And it just felt so surreal to be able to enjoy this thing, this part of the natural world that we get so detached from when we live in cities and towns. And I found it quite disturbing that this had been such an unusual experience for him. Because I love looking at stars. You know, I love doing that cliche thing of looking up and being reminded how small we are and how small our planet is compared to the vastness of the universe. So I was not surprised at all to read that supposedly one of the hot travel trends of 2025 is noctourism, travel by night, and visiting new places in the darkness. It's not just about getting out into nature and enjoying the night skies, although that does seem to be the obvious thing to do. It could also be night tours of cities when it's less hot and crowded. You might want to go hunting for truffles in the woods in parts of Europe. That's often something that's easier at night when it's easier for the dogs to smell the truffles because the smell wafts up through the soil more at nighttime. Oh. Honestly, I don't know how seriously to take these rather fluffy news reports about this apparent travel trend. Supposedly, tourism companies are reporting a rise in bookings for things like trips to see the Northern Lights in Iceland and Sweden and elsewhere. I think to some extent it's just a fun, light thing for journalists to write about at an otherwise miserable time. Mm-hmm. But it does also make sense as a travel trend, right? Like over-tourism has become a massive problem across Europe. It is also hotter than it's ever been. So it does kind of make sense for people to be craving these travel experiences that are less hot and less crowded.
It does.
If I'm being honest, I have lived in urban areas for my entire life, and I never really thought that much about what I was missing, not being able to see the stars on the regular. But especially now that I'm raising a kid in a city, I am quite troubled by the fact that if we're lucky, we might be able to go somewhere this summer where my son can see stars for the first time, at which point he will be 2 years old. So that's kind of disturbing.
Can 2-year-olds even see that far away?
I think his eyes are pretty good, actually. They're definitely better than mine.
Okay.
I'm half blind. But yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit more, this idea of light pollution, to what extent it is a problem in Europe, how it affects us, and what we can do to fix it. And someone who has thought about light much more than most people is the writer Anna Levin. She was born in Wales but has lived in Scotland for a very long time. She is the author of 2 books about the impact of artificial light on both the natural world and our own health as humans. And I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about light in such a beautiful, spellbinding kind of way as Anna does. Dominic and I gave her a ring up in Scotland. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did.
Hi, Anna. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello, great to be here.
We're here to talk about light today. And I wanted to start by asking you, why did you become so fascinated with light and the quality of light in the first place?
Yeah, that's interesting because I worked for years as a wildlife and environmental journalist and never really thought about light. And then I actually came into the subject from a completely different perspective because I started getting ill from the new version of the curly CFL low energy light bulbs. And I started asking questions like, what's the difference? So what's the difference in the stuff that comes out of them and the old incandescent light bulbs? And that led me to a whole path of physics and international legislation and what was going on in the EU at the time. And then I sort of came full circle because I started going to dark sky conferences and reading lots of papers, and I realised how much this was an issue for the natural world and for wildlife and for the marine environment. So now I've brought the 2 bits of my life together and writing about impact of light on the natural world, ourselves included, of course.
I mean, I don't know how hard it is to quantify this, but just how bright is the modern world compared to, I don't know, the pre-industrial one? Like, is it possible to measure that?
It is possible to measure that, but the funny thing about light is it isn't a thing. It's a very multifaceted mystery phenomena, a force of energy. So whatever you measure, you're missing something out. And that's part of the problem with legislating about light. The other problem about light is it's a human concept. What we call light is a little slither of the electromagnetic spectrum that's visible to humans, but it's not the same as what's visible to birds or rattlesnakes. So what we measure is a bit of an iffy one. But what we definitely can say is that the world has got tens of hundreds of times brighter over the last century, and over the last decades that's exacerbated, and that's just become an explosion of light, partly because of LED lighting being brighter and bluer and lighting the night a lot more. And we can also say that it's something that the world has never seen before. We've had climates changing, we've had continents shifting, we've had volcanoes and things. But light, dawn, day, dusk, night has been this steady pattern for the whole of evolution. So it's what they call novel in scientific terms. It's something that life on Earth has never dealt with before.
And I guess that's one of the reasons why we refer to light as pollution as well. And for someone like me who's never spent that much time really thinking about our relationship to light, why does it make sense to talk about light in that term as a pollution? Why is the darkness something that's worth protecting?
I think people didn't really realise till we started losing darkness and vanquishing the night through a lot of the planet and way beyond the cities, because you've got sky glow that's bright all over the world, and we've got satellites now making the night sky brighter, even far from where there's human habitation. And what we're now finding, what we've lost, is that light is time in the natural world. And the natural world includes the cells in our bodies and our nervous system and our immune system and our endocrine system. And when we talk about body clocks, you think we're talking about going to sleep and waking up, but it's way, way more than that. It sets every physiological process in the body, from bowel movements to blood sugar to cell renewal. So it's got huge implications for things like cancer and diabetes. It affects everything, because every cell has a body clock in a fruit fly or a human. And what we're now starting to realise is that by changing light, it's not just about having too much light at night, but also the wrong type of light, because the quality of light has changed as well as the quantity. We're messing with time in our cells, in our bodies, in the interaction between bird migration and plant pollination, and all the systems that go on in the world and within us are getting messed up. And at a time of climate change, when they're already messed up by the seasons, that is exacerbating the disruption, to the extent that ecologists are saying light pollution and the loss of the night is as significant as climate change in the disruption of the natural world. But we don't hear nearly as much about it.
Wow, yeah. I mean, have we got better at recognising the impact of light pollution in recent years? Is it something that governments, people, authorities are actively managing to some extent to fight and to limit?
It depends who the we is. I think Britain's quite behind. There's a lot of countries in Europe doing much better with light pollution. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of interest in bringing in regulations at a European level. We've got an all-party parliamentary group in dark skies in Britain. But I think in the general public and the politicians, it's building, it's coming, but it's still not recognised. And you need those sort of sea changes, like we've had a lot with plastics, and you have an Attenborough programme and the problem of plastic pollution in the ocean, and suddenly it becomes less acceptable just to be having single-use plastic forks and chucking your water bottle. And we need that sort of sea change in lighting. On a very domestic, personal level, of people just shutting the curtains and putting the lights off and not polluting your garden by having the lights spilling out or having outdoor lights. But I get a distorted picture because I'm very, I'm writing about it, I'm going to conferences and I'm in a dark sky scene. And then I, go on the school run or I meet people and they've no idea what dark sky. They think it's something from Star Wars or something. No idea that that's a thing. But it's growing, and I think that's cause for hope. And it's growing in all sorts of levels, in human health, in ecology. There's been masses of scientific papers come out in the last few years. And I think there's always a time lag between the science goes ahead and then it filters into policy and public awareness later along. So I think we're in that wave.
So closing curtains is one thing that we can do as individuals as the sun sets. But what are some of the other things that local authorities or governments are doing? What are some of the exciting projects and initiatives that are coming up?
I mean, I think something to celebrate is the rise of the dark sky movement, which is designated dark sky places, which can be an island or, which is basically like in the ocean, you've got marine reserves where you're protecting that area. It's all controlled by Dark Sky International, based in Arizona, but it's a global movement. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the darkest place, but what it means is there's a human commitment to preserving the darkness. So it's not about having no light, it's about having appropriate light and the least disturbing light to life on Earth, to the nocturnal environment, and to humans sleeping in nearby.
And supposedly some of these dark sky certified spots might be about to see an influx of tourists because apparently nighttime tourism is going to be the next big craze of travel in 2025. Where do you think that craving for darkness is coming from?
I think that's a good place to read you a wee bit from my initial book, Incandescent. We need to talk about light.
Yes, please.
I'll just go for it and let it speak for itself. I sense two forces, both surging, growing, building momentum at astonishing speed and picking up power throughout the world. One is a great wave, garish and roaring, thundering across the planet at a thrill-seeking pace. It's sparkling and dazzling, excited and chattering, calling in a shrill voice, brighter, newer, more, more, more. It grows and glows. You can watch its conquest from space. See the world fill up with smudges and stains and pinpricks of light as it spreads its shrieking brightness, vanquishing darkness all over the planet. It's driven by a voracious, insatiable monster called profit, which harnesses technology, legislation and fervent belief as it pushes ever onward, surging ahead with its delirium of newness, obliterating opposition with its sheer weight, pounding anything old, anything gone before. This wave seems unstoppable. It's reaching tsunami proportions, heedless to the devastation of all that lies in its path. And it would crush me too, if it wasn't for another force that's also growing stronger and is keeping me afloat, sustaining me. Broader and quieter, but no less powerful, a deep current is tugging just below the surface. It's swirling around the world, linking continents, carrying nutrients, surging ever onwards. It is stirring something ancient, reaching down to an ache from the dawn of time and carrying it forward, a longing for a purer, simpler way. It pulls and pulls, away from the shrill machinery of new towards simplicity and authenticity. It speaks of things that are real, natural, earth, air, soil, fire, sky, things that have always been. Conversations by candlelight, digging a potato from the earth, the sensation of wind in hair. It craves real food, real light, real darkness, the movement of the moon and the enchantment of the stars. It seeks the night sky, rich and deep and mysterious, to be enclosed by it and opened by it to connection with others, with the world, and with something bigger beyond us all.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you. But that's the sense they had when I was, researching Incandescent, and that's just, the spread and the growth of light and in dark sky circles. And there's a lot of talk about Alan at the moment, the acronym Artificial Light at Night. And I imagine this guy, Alan, stomping over the world, and he's really loud and garish. And
Alan.
Alan is out of hand. Alan has gone wrong. He's the sort of Frankenstein that we've created and, loved, and he's just taken over and gone mad. Yet at the same time, there's this growing seeking for, I link it to the wild swimming craze as well, of people coming out of the water and they say they feel alive. And there's something about the way we live in the modern world that can dull something of the aliveness. And sometimes you forget what you're missing. A lot of people growing up in cities don't even know that they're missing the stars. People are growing up not even having experienced a pristine night sky, when you feel that you could just pick the stars out of the sky and the Milky Way is just a shining band. And people don't even know that. But somewhere in them, there is a craving for that. And I think that darkness and the night sky is a huge part of our human experience. When people have an opportunity to experience that, they link it to a place. So in tourism terms, if you can go somewhere and see that, You think, oh, that's the sky above the Isle of Rum, or that's the sky above the Cairngorms. And of course, it's the same sky, but this Allen's in the way everywhere else. So it's places that you can get Allen out the way have now become a really attractive place to go to.
Yeah, and with that in mind, maybe it's an inappropriate question to jump onto the tourism train here, but where are your favourite places in the world where you're able to avoid Allen?
Get away from Allen. Well, I'm lucky to live in Scotland, and even though there's a dire lack of awareness on a council and a government level here, due to the small population and the big wild space, there are some really wonderful places that you can go. So I love heading north, going up to Pitlochry and up to the Cairngorms. I love the islands. I lived for a while on the Isle of Mull, and just starry nights were part of life there, as they once were for everybody once upon a time. I'll add in the Isle of Coll in the Inner Hebrides. I've had some of the most amazing moonlight and starlight that I've ever experienced, sort of walking around at night there. And again, I think of it as being in a place, but that sky is everywhere, and that's what more of us should and could have.